Welcome to this webinar on mindfulness training. My name is Amelie Soulard. I'm a psychologist and a specialist in mental training since 2010, and more specifically working with the National Institute of Sport in Quebec since 2013. I worked with more than 350 individual athletes, a dozen of teams of different levels, in more than 30 different sports, going from Paralympic boccia to university volleyball, synchronized parachuting, and biathlon. For the next few minutes, I'll first explain why our traditional mental control strategies let us down most of the time, and I'll explain to you what alternative I propose. It is mindfulness, and we'll see how mindfulness can be useful in your athlete's mental preparation. I'll show you how to train mindfulness, and we'll go through different exercises that you can actually incorporate into your workouts and training programs. Over the years, I've heard all kinds of beliefs about the mind of athletes. Here are just a few examples you could hear on a pool deck, on a field, sidelines, or in a gym. You've probably heard, don't think about your stress, it's all about attitude, it's in your head, stop overthinking, that kind of thing. These thoughts come from beliefs that are firmly rooted into the world of sport competition. Who does not remember the famous "no pain, no gain, no Spain," the slogan from Barcelona Olympics in 1992? The thought that to win and to be successful in sport, it is necessary to eliminate any form of stress, negative thoughts, or emotions is still very present in sports. We like to believe that our champions are those who are always in control of their emotions, those who have flawless focus and who never flinch. But is it really the case? Are we really in control of our thoughts and of our emotions? I suggest that you take a short test to evaluate your skills as a thought tamer. Well, let's see how good you are at controlling or taming your thoughts and feelings. For this first exercise, please sit comfortably with your back firmly against the chair and both your feet flat on the floor. During the next minute, your goal will be to think of nothing. Nothing at all. Ready? Let's go. Is it working? I bet that you were not able to think about nothing. Am I wrong? In fact, a first thought probably arose into your consciousness, and then that resulted into a second thought, and then a third one, and then a fourth one. Our thoughts often come in the form of a chain, because this is how our language is organized. When we learned to speak as a child, we formed categories in our brain and created links between those categories and therefore between words and ideas. So one thought leads to another, that leads to another, that leads to another. And it is impossible not to think, and we're not able to block out ideas. So the more we think, and the more we think, and we don't control our thoughts. They come and go as they please. Because this is just how our brain works. Thoughts are created automatically in our brain, and we're not sometimes we're just simply not aware of it. It's the same thing for emotions. Have you ever jumped at an unexpected presence of someone who calls your name by surprise? Fear arises without giving you the time to think about it. A little bit like a reflex. Reflexes are automatic and therefore they're very difficult to control. In sports, we often try to block, control thoughts. Sometimes we even try to change a negative thought by a positive thought, or we try to repress fear or stress. But as we've seen, when we're playing the tamer, it often doesn't work, and it proves more difficult than we think. In reality, the emotions and negative thoughts that we try to repress often take over and come back. Our strategies for controlling thought and emotion are not very effective. They require a lot of energy and a lot of our time. And during a performance, this energy, this attention could actually be invested somewhere else, in the technique or in the tactics, for example. When our control strategies don't work, as it's often the case, athletes simply have the impression that they're stupid, they're inefficient, incompetent, or simply mentally weak. And that creates more stress and that affects their motivation. Although some of our control strategies could be useful in a very short term, several studies have shown that, for example, in endurance sports, these strategies are very ineffective. I'll give you a couple of examples of our control strategies. For example, we have two types of strategies. First, the fight strategies. The first one is to repress, to push back, to bury our emotion deep inside ourselves and to simply forget about it. The second one is to attack, to argue, to be on the defensive, or to blame others. The third one would be to depreciate, to devaluate either oneself or others, and to speak negatively to ourselves or to others. On the flight strategy, we have first avoiding. Avoiding would be procrastinating or being in denial, for example. We have distraction, distracting ourselves by doing something else, by not thinking about the emotion that makes us uncomfortable. And finally, to be numb, so numbing our discomfort using various means such as drug or alcohol abuse, for example. So what's the alternative? The alternative to control strategies and to other traditional mental preparation strategies is something called mindfulness. Mindfulness is a voluntary and non-judgmental awareness of the physical, emotional, and cognitive experience here and now. It's about being open, no matter what it is, to the experience in the present moment. No matter if the experience is positive or negative. More and more studies have demonstrated the superiority of acceptance strategies such as mindfulness over traditional control strategies. When we train mindfulness in sports, we actually develop several different things. The first thing we develop is meta-awareness. That's the ability to become aware of our own feelings, thoughts, or emotions. The second thing we develop is acceptance. Acceptance is the ability to accept and tolerate the presence of negative emotions without judgment or harsh criticism. The third thing is refocusing. To refocus means to have the ability to recenter our attention on the task at hand. We also train diffusion. That's recognizing our negative thoughts for what they really are. They're only thoughts. They're not fact and they're not realities. And finally, we train abdominal breathing. We also call that type of breathing diaphragmatic breathing. In the next part of this webinar, we'll go over several exercises to train your athlete's ability to be mindful. What I suggest is a 5-step training plan, and you can include those 5 steps into your annual training plan. So the first step is the introduction to mindfulness. During that phase, it's important to define what mindfulness is, and it's also important as a coach to really ensure that you tolerate negative emotions and negative feelings and negative self-talk in your athletes. We really want to be a model for our athletes. So mindfulness is about accepting, it's about being non-judgmental, and you gotta model that. You can start that first phase right at the beginning of the season. In that first phase, we'll also train the athlete to use abdominal breathing. One way to get the athletes to become more aware of their breathing is to ask them to place one hand on their chest and one hand on their abdomen, and just to breathe normally. So they'll notice which hands moves more than the other. In stressful situations, we know that the breathing is more thoracic. While relaxing, the breathing will be more abdominal. So the athlete can explore the different types of breathing in different situations. And we'll slowly ask the athlete to focus more on the abdominal breathing, more on the stomach. Another way to introduce mindfulness is to help athletes to become more aware of their sensations. And for that, we'll ask them to focus on their body. So we'll ask them to do what we call a body scan. So they'll be observing their reactions, their sensations, and simply be present to that. So they can actually scan their body from the toes to the top of their head and simply observe and notice. They have to remember that a scanner, right, is some kind of a machine. So the scanner doesn't judge. The scanner is not there to show them what is right or what is wrong, what feels good or what feels bad. The body scan is simply there to show them what is present. So they can become aware of their sweaty hands, they can become aware of the butterflies in their stomach when they're stressed, without judging them, without being harsh on themselves. Abdominal breathing can be used during that phase as well, and it can be trained for periods as short as 5 minutes per day, and it helps accepting and making space for whatever is present, feelings or sensations or thoughts. The second phase of mindfulness training is to train self-awareness and lucidity. So we already talked about the body scan. Another way to train that is to do a mind scan. The mind scan is actually that very short exercise I asked you to do at the beginning of the webinar, where you had to think about nothing. So they can practice that mind scan, and they can actually notice their thoughts. You can ask your athletes to do that little exercise for 1 to 3 minutes. And athletes will quickly notice that in times of stress, they will have more negative thoughts, and they can actually refocus on their breathing, and that helps to deal with those negative thoughts. They can also practice what we call diffusion by simply adding, I'm telling myself that, or I find that, or I feel that, before their actual self-talk. Sorry. I'll stop here.
And I'm turning my microphone off right now, so whenever you're ready.
All right. Another version of the body scan is the mind scan. The mind scan is actually the little exercise you did at the very beginning of this webinar, when I asked you to think of nothing. Athletes may be asked to do this exercise for 1 to 3 minutes, and they can actually review the thoughts that are present in their head. And they'll quickly notice that in times of stress, there are more negative thoughts, and when they can actually focus on their breathing, they will deal with these thoughts more efficiently. Finally, we can ask athletes to become aware of their internal dialogue and what actually they say to themselves in their head. They are led to practice what we call diffusion by adding, I tell myself, or I find that, I feel that, in front of each of their thoughts. For example, if the athlete says, I'm not ready, I won't be able to do it, she can add, I'm telling myself that I'm not ready. I'm telling myself that I'm not going to be able to do it. So it gives the athlete perspective. She can put her thoughts into perspective, and she can distance herself from her thoughts. After all, a thought is only a thought. It's not a fact, and it's not a reality. Another way to create perspective is actually to ask ourselves, is what I'm telling myself really true? So that's another way to create diffusion. The third step into the mindfulness training program is acceptance training. And the first exercise we can do is first to name the emotion. So, for example, let's say I'm disappointed at my performance. I'm feeling deception. So, naming the emotion. I'm feeling disappointment. I'm feeling stress. And with that, we can even add saying thank you to our feeling. For example, if an athlete is feeling stress, she can say, I'm feeling stressed, and then saying, thank you, my stress. You allow me to be alert and vigilant. You give me the adrenaline I need to run faster. So that's another way to accept emotions. For example, after a disappointment in his performance, an athlete could say, I'm sad, and it's normal because it's important for me to improve and to achieve my goal. Thank you. I realize how important it is for me. So that would be the thank you technique. In this phase, the athletes must learn that it's normal to experience negative feelings. And once again, the coach plays a very important role in normalizing these emotions. Another way to work on acceptance is for the athletes to actually ask themselves, who do I want to be in this situation? For example, if I'm feeling stressed, I could feel it. I have butterfly in my stomach. I have sweaty hands. My heart is racing. But who do I want to be in this situation? Do I want to be stressed, or do I want to be confident? So I can feel stress, but I'll act confident. So that's why I can actually fake it till I make it in a certain way. I can act calm, I can smile, I can walk with my head tall, my head high, can walk tall and act confident. And then calm will come. The fourth phase in the refocusing technique, the refocusing
Okay, it's going on mute now. Continue.
The fourth phase of the mindfulness training is the refocusing training. It's about identifying with the athlete focus points that are the key to their performance. Those points can be internal, for example, body parts, or external, a landmark on a field, for example. Keywords can be used to help the athletes remember their focus points. And a good exercise to train that is to practice yoga. The practice of yoga brings the attention on certain movements and certain body positions. Distractions can be many, noises, imbalance, discomfort, but we must always bring our focus back on the breathing, on the balance, and on the movement or the body parts that actually do the movement. So it's a good way to practice refocusing. Finally, the last step into this mindfulness training is integrating each of these phases into everyday life and especially into training. For example, you can ask the athlete to do his body scan and to refocus on his movement during the warm-up. You can always ask the athlete to become more aware of their internal self-talk and to practice the diffusion of thoughts and emotions and behaviors during a difficult drill. The athlete can also practice mindfulness meditation at home with the help of certain applications, such as Headspace, for example. Actually, I invite you to experiment mindfulness by yourself. Many coaches I work with have become followers of mindfulness meditation, and they see the benefits of this type of meditation in their coaching. In conclusion, I'd like to leave you with the last words of paraswimmer Benoit Huot. He came back from Rio's Paralympic Games with his 20th medal. And when he came back at the end of September on national television, he summarized his mindfulness training. The mindfulness training he had gone through before competing in Rio. And he said, "I learned that stress will always be a part of my life. It's like a piece of antique I would have inherited from my grandmother. It doesn't fit anywhere in my postmodern decor, but I just can't get rid of it. It's there to stay. But I can choose what I want to do with it. I can either put it in the middle of the living room where I trip on it every day, or I can put it in a corner of a room where it doesn't bother me as much. So I think it summarizes very well what we're trying to train here. We're not trying to get the stress out of our lives. We're trying to live better with stress. So don't forget, negative thoughts and feelings such as stress are totally normal. We can get rid of them. We can't control them, but we can become more aware of them, accept them, and put them into perspective with breathing and refocusing. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to contact me. My email address is at the bottom of this slide. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you.